When we talk about the story of Islam in Egypt, we are talking about more than just religious transformation. We're talking about a journey of civilizations, power, resilience, and cultural evolution that has unfolded over more than 1,300 years. Egypt, one of the oldest centers of civilization on earth, has played a pivotal role in shaping the Islamic world. And Islam, in turn, has profoundly shaped Egypt, its cities, its people, and its legacy. Before Islam arrived, Egypt was a province of the Byzantine Empire. The dominant religion was Christianity, more specifically, the Coptic Orthodox Church. But beneath the surface, many Egyptians were deeply dissatisfied. The native Copts faced heavy taxation and harsh persecution under Byzantine rule. There was an atmosphere of religious and social repression that left many disillusioned. Then came a turning point in history. Around the year 640 CE, Amr ibn al-As, a general of the Rashidun Caliphate under Caliph Umar ibn al-Khattab, led the Muslim army into Egypt. What followed was not just a military conquest, but a seismic shift in the region's identity. The Battle of Heliopolis and the siege of the Babylon fortress marked key victories for the Muslims. And in 642 CE, the great city of Alexandria, then the capital of Byzantine Egypt, surrendered. But what made this conquest particularly unique was not only the military strategy, but the reception. Many Coptic Christians, weary of Byzantine oppression, saw the Muslims as liberators. The new rulers offered fairer taxation and allowed a greater degree of religious tolerance, conditions that were at the time revolutionary. Under Rashidun and Umayyad rule, Egypt became a province of the growing Islamic Caliphate. A new capital, Fustat, was established near what is now modern Cairo. Arabic gradually replaced Coptic and Greek as the administrative language, and Islamic law began to guide governance. With the Abbasids, Islamization and Arabization deepened. Mosques and madrasas, Islamic schools, began to fill the cities. Islam wasn't just a religion here, it was becoming a civilizational framework. Then, in 969 CE, another major chapter began. The Fatimids, a Shia dynasty, took control and made Cairo their capital. Cairo wasn't just a political seat, it was envisioned as a beacon of Islamic scholarship and influence. In 970 CE, they founded Al-Azhar University, originally a Shia institution. But over time, particularly after Sunni Ayyubid rule took over under the leadership of Saladin in the late 12th century, Al-Azhar shifted its identity and became the most prestigious Sunni Islamic university in the world. Saladin, a Sunni Kurd, ended Fatimid Shia rule and re-established Sunni orthodoxy. The Mamluks followed, building magnificent mosques and turning Cairo into a centerpiece of Islamic intellectual life that would endure for centuries. When the Ottomans took control in 1517, Egypt became part of a vast Islamic empire. Yet local Islamic institutions like Al-Azhar remained strong and continued to influence law, education, and daily life. For centuries, Al-Azhar would be Egypt's religious spine, guarding Sunni tradition while producing generations of scholars who would shape Islam far beyond Egyptian borders. In the 19th century, under the Muhammad Ali dynasty and later British colonial rule, secular reforms began to creep in. Yet Islam remained deeply embedded in Egyptian identity. Nationalism and religion walked side by side. Even as Egypt looked toward modernization, the mosque remained a place not just of worship, but of community and culture. After the 1952 revolution, led by Gamal Abdel Nasser, Egypt saw a new wave of secular nationalism. For a time, political Islam was pushed to the margins. But by the 1970s, religion was making a comeback in public life. Movements like the Muslim Brotherhood gained traction, and Islamic identity began to reassert itself in politics, education, and society. Today, Al-Azhar continues to be one of the most influential institutions in the Sunni Muslim world, offering not just religious rulings, but guidance on ethics, philosophy, and law. Throughout all of this history, Egypt has given the world some of Islam's most profound thinkers. Imam al-Shafi'i, one of the founding jurists of Sunni Islamic law, Al-Ghazali, the theologian and philosopher who bridged reason and spirituality, and Muhammad Abduh, a reformer who sought to harmonize Islam with modern science and rationality. They all left their mark on global Islamic thought, and they all had roots in Egypt. Today, Islam is everywhere in Egyptian life, not just in mosques or prayer times, but in the rhythm of daily routines, in festivals and customs, in the legal framework, and even in Egypt's art and literature. From the echoing call to prayer in Cairo to quiet dawn prayers in the villages along the Nile, Islam in Egypt is not just a faith, it is a lived experience, shaped by centuries of triumph, trial, and transformation. So when we speak of Islam in Egypt, we are telling the story of a people and a civilization that have grown together, adapted together, and stood resilient in the face of time. It is a story still being written, with every call to prayer, every verse studied at Al-Azhar, and every child growing up with a legacy that stretches all the way back to the deserts of Medina and the banks of the Nile. Now that we've explored the rich history of how Islam came to Egypt and evolved over the centuries, let's turn to the present day. Today, Islam is not just a historical influence, it is the dominant faith in modern Egypt. According to recent estimates, around 90% of Egypt's population identifies as Muslim. That's nearly 100 million people whose daily lives, culture, values, and traditions are deeply shaped by Islam. But what kind of Islam do they follow? The overwhelming majority, about 99% of Egyptian Muslims, are Sunni. Sunni Islam is not just a theological identity here. It's a part of Egypt's national religious infrastructure. Institutions like Al-Azhar University, one of the oldest and most prestigious Sunni centers of learning in the world, continue to define and guide the mainstream Islamic discourse in the country. From daily worship practices to religious rulings, Sunni traditions have become deeply embedded in the rhythm of Egyptian society. But Egypt's Islamic landscape isn't completely uniform. There is a small but historically rooted Shia Muslim minority. Estimates of the number of Shia Muslims in Egypt vary widely, ranging from 800,000 to perhaps as many as 2 million individuals. That's less than 1% of the total population, but their presence reflects centuries of religious diversity within Islam itself. However, understanding the true number of Shia Muslims in Egypt is complicated. There is no official census data that distinguishes between Sunni and Shia sects, and many Shia Muslims, due to political pressures and social sensitivities, choose not to publicly identify as such. Egypt has at times seen tension around the sectarian identity, with Shia communities occasionally facing suspicion or discrimination. This climate can make open expression of Shia religious practices difficult, which in turn affects how they are counted in surveys or public records. In truth, the lack of transparency makes it difficult to know the exact size of Egypt's Shia population. What we do know is that the country remains overwhelmingly Sunni, both in numbers and in state-supported religious structures. Yet within that dominant framework, other voices, Shia, Sufi, and even reformist Islamic perspectives continue to exist, often quietly, sometimes cautiously. So while Egypt may appear religiously monolithic from the outside, the lived reality is more nuanced. It's a country where Islam is everywhere, from the call to prayer in the streets of Cairo to the quiet reflection of faith in a small village in Aswan. But it's also a country where identity can be layered, complex, and at times politically sensitive. As we continue to explore Islam in Egypt, it's important to remember this balance between the visible and the invisible, the dominant and the marginal, the traditional and the diverse. Because behind the numbers and percentages are real people, worshipers, scholars, families, living out their faith in all its expressions within one of the most historically significant Islamic nations in the world. Now that we understand the history of Islam in Egypt and who makes up its Muslim population, let's step into everyday life, into the streets, homes, and routines that define what it means to be a Muslim in modern Egypt. Because Islam here isn't just practiced in mosques or formal settings, it's woven into the very rhythm of life, from the quiet villages of Upper Egypt to the bustling avenues of Cairo. Across the country, the call to prayer, the adhan, rings out 5 times a day, marking moments of pause, of reflection, of connection. In cities like Cairo, Alexandria, and Luxor, the sound is almost like the heartbeat of the day. Whether you're a student, a shopkeeper, or a government employee, life tends to shift around these sacred times. On Fridays, it's even more pronounced. Friday prayer, or Jumu'ah, is a deeply significant weekly event. Mosques fill up, and many businesses slow down or even close so people can attend. It's a moment of unity, of community. During Ramadan, that rhythm changes dramatically. Days become quieter, more introspective, while nights come alive with energy. Families gather at sunset for iftar, breaking their fast with dates, water, and traditional dishes. Streets are lit with lanterns, and everywhere you go, there's a sense of generosity and compassion. Charity meals, known as Mawa'id Rahman, are prepared and served to the public, especially the poor, in large communal gatherings. And when Eid al-Fitr and Eid al-Adha arrive, the joy is everywhere. Special prayers, new clothes, shared meals, and family reunions bring the nation together in celebration. But religion is just one part of the equation. Social and cultural life plays a huge role too. In Egypt, the family is the cornerstone of society. Life is often centered around extended family networks, visiting relatives, sharing meals, supporting one another. Gender roles are still quite traditional in many areas, especially outside the big cities. Women often dress modestly, many wearing the hijab or loose-fitting clothing. These norms are more strictly observed in rural regions and smaller towns, though urban areas like Cairo are seeing more diversity in how these customs are interpreted. When it comes to work and education, Egyptian Muslims are everywhere, in offices, farms, schools, markets, and universities. Agriculture remains a key livelihood, especially in Upper Egypt and the Nile Delta. Meanwhile, Cairo and Giza serve as the country's economic and governmental hubs, home to ministries, financial institutions, and universities. And of course, Al-Azhar, one of the most influential Islamic institutions globally, continues to educate future imams and scholars, shaping Islamic thought in Egypt and beyond. Food is another rich part of daily life. Egyptian cuisine is delicious, affordable, and firmly halal, in line with Islamic dietary laws. Staples like fulmeta maize, fava beans, koshari, a beloved street food made from rice, lentils, and pasta, falafel, and grilled meats are popular across all regions. Meals are often a shared experience, a time for gathering and storytelling, especially during Ramadan or family celebrations. When the day winds down, many Egyptians turn to media, television, religious programs, Quran recitations, or the latest Ramadan series. Entertainment here often reflects Islamic and traditional values, particularly in more conservative households. While satellite and internet access have expanded the range of content, the values portrayed still lean toward the respectful and family-friendly. Geographically, Muslims in Egypt are everywhere, but some areas stand out in terms of density and cultural expression. Cairo, with its vast population, blends tradition and modernity. It's home to world-famous mosques, Islamic schools, and a fast-paced, complex society. Giza, as part of Greater Cairo, is equally populous and predominantly Sunni. Alexandria, a coastal jewel with deep Islamic roots, carries a unique energy and a strong sense of community. Then there's the Nile Delta, made up of fertile villages where Islam is practiced with deep tradition and simplicity. In Upper Egypt, Islamic customs are especially strong and conservative, and in the Sinai Peninsula, Bedouin Muslims live out their faith in more isolated, tribal settings with their own unique customs and interpretations. So what does daily life look like for a Muslim in Egypt? It's a blend of faith and family, of prayer and perseverance. It's waking up before sunrise for Fajr, commuting through a city that never sleeps, breaking bread with your loved ones after a day of fasting, or simply reflecting in the mosque around the corner. It's the sound of the Quran, the scent of cumin and grilled lamb, the smile of a neighbor during Eid. Islam in Egypt isn't just a religion, it's a way of life, a rhythm that pulses across city and countryside alike, shaping the character of a nation. While Egypt is proudly home to one of the largest Muslim populations in the world, roughly 90% of its people, it would be a mistake to assume that this religious majority faces no challenges. In reality, Muslims in Egypt live at the intersection of tradition and modernity under a state that both promotes Islam as a cultural identity and tightly controls its expression. The result is a landscape filled with contradictions, where faith is everywhere, but freedom within that faith is often restricted. Let's start with one of the most sensitive issues, religious freedom and sectarian diversity. Egypt is overwhelmingly Sunni, and Sunni Islam is deeply embedded in the national identity. But even within Sunni circles, diversity of thought is often discouraged. Meanwhile, the small Shia Muslim minority, less than 1% of the population, faces discrimination and surveillance. Public Shia worship is heavily restricted. Some have been arrested under vague accusations like spreading Shiaism, and others live with the quiet fear of being misunderstood or falsely labeled. Groups like the Ahmadiyya or Quranists, who differ in interpretation or approach, are often dismissed outright as deviant sects and may face social or even legal backlash. This tension is compounded by the reality that religious institutions are not entirely independent. While Al-Azhar University continues to be one of the world's most respected Sunni Islamic authorities, its voice is increasingly shaped by the state. The government not only funds much of its operation, it also monitors sermons, appoints preachers, and dictates religious messaging to ensure alignment with political priorities. Imams who speak out or stray from the approved script risk arrest. Even independent religious discussion online or in private gatherings can lead to prosecution if it's deemed too controversial or politically sensitive. Then there are the economic struggles, particularly in Upper Egypt and rural communities. Many Muslims here face high unemployment, and for young people, the future often looks uncertain. The dream of marriage, or a marriage career, or even moving to the city can feel distant. This creates not just frustration, but in some cases a turn toward radicalization or ultra-conservatism, especially when economic hardship is coupled with poor religious education and isolation from alternative viewpoints. Gender roles present another complex challenge. While women in Cairo and other urban centers are increasingly visible in education, the workforce, and public life, traditional gender norms remain strong, especially in rural areas. Sexual harassment, domestic violence, and societal pressure continue to affect many women's lives. Some religious leaders still discourage women from seeking careers or higher education, citing conservative interpretations of Islamic teachings, though this narrative is being steadily challenged by younger, reform-minded Egyptians. And of course, any discussion of Islam in Egypt must include the tense relationship between political Islam and the state. Since the 2013 coup that ousted the Muslim Brotherhood from power, the government has pursued a hardline stance against political Islam. The Brotherhood is now banned and labeled a terrorist organization. Thousands of Islamists, some peaceful, others not, have been imprisoned, exiled, or silenced, creating an atmosphere of fear and caution even among moderate Muslims who simply want a greater role for faith in public life. This fear extends to freedom of speech as well. Egypt's blasphemy laws are broad and ambiguous, giving authorities the power to arrest artists, writers, and even religious reformers for expressing dissenting views. People have been jailed for questioning outdated interpretations, for defending marginalized sects, or even for publishing Quran-focused commentary online. The message is clear: religious thought is welcome, so long as it stays within the boundaries defined by the state. Another root problem is religious education itself. While Islam is taught in schools across the country, the system often relies on rote memorization instead of critical thinking. In underserved areas, the lack of qualified religious educators leads some to seek knowledge from unofficial preachers or unverified internet sources, opening the door to misinformation, intolerance, and even extremism. And finally, beyond Egypt's borders, Muslims from Egypt face another kind of challenge: Islamophobia abroad. Whether traveling, studying, or working overseas, many practicing Muslims, especially those who wear traditional dress or observe their faith openly, find themselves subject to suspicion, profiling, or discrimination. For Egyptian youth, this double pressure, marginalized at home for their beliefs, misunderstood abroad for the same, creates a sense of isolation that's hard to ignore. So yes, Egypt is a Muslim-majority country, and Islam is part of the national soul. But that doesn't mean every Muslim in Egypt lives free from difficulty. Between state control, sectarian tension, economic hardship, gender inequality, restricted speech, and flawed education systems, many Muslims, particularly those outside the mainstream, face a range of complex challenges. These are not just policy issues. These are human issues, felt in daily life, in families, and in the quiet spaces of private faith. Understanding these challenges is essential, not to criticize Egypt, but to recognize that faith, when politicized or controlled, becomes vulnerable. The story of Islam in Egypt is one of beauty and endurance, but also one of struggle, and acknowledging both sides is the only way to truly appreciate the full picture. If this deep dive into the history, daily life, and challenges of Muslims in Egypt gave you a new perspective, don't forget to like the video, subscribe to the channel, and share it with others who care about faith, culture, and truth. What part of the story stood out to you the most? Let us know in the comments below. We read every one. And if you'd like us to explore similar stories from other countries or regions, drop your suggestions. We're building this journey together. See you in the next video.